Yeah, and this is kind of weird and foreign to some people, but when the wrestler's as good as this, like you can hear it as it's happening. If that
Mm.
makes any sense. Like it tells itself specifically if you tuned in, you tapped in like we all watched a bunch of this stuff. You know these, well, you can call the movies yourself. It's rarely anything that they can do that we've not seen. Um, so you know the performance, you know what it is, you know the stories of these women. You more so than most people. So you
Mm.
already have everything in your head. You really don't need any adage uh, to it. Like you said, you appreciate it when it's there, but the wrestling is so good that the story kind of tells itself. You just kind of long for the ride, and the emotions are always there. And like I said, they do such a great job because it's Joshi and a lot of other Japanese promotions and scenarios where the story is just such a long weaving thing that's always coming back around and weaving in and out that all you kind of have to do is get in that square circle and kind of just top it out. And that's what they did here. Like I said, the way she and Sareee went about this, there was no way watching this that I believed that to her she wasn't going to win this.
Yeah, because
And
she's so
him
good at
eventually.
throwing herself into matches. And look at all the matches we've seen her in this year in Marigold and Stardom and in New Japan and Sendai Girls. And she's just so good. It's just like it's unfair how good she is. Like it's she's getting into that generational kind of level that Mako Satomura was at. And Hashimoto is as well. You know, you putting together your top 10 wrestlers in the world, and if that these two aren't on the list, that's not a list that doesn't qualify because you ain't watched enough wrestling and you ain't watched enough Sendai Girls. So you know, it yeah. This is the thing. You know, it's pro wrestling subjective, and you know what I say is my personal opinion, as is yours, Marcus. But it is like just on a different level right now. There isn't anyone touching them at all as far as match quality every day. You know, not just every. And I'm look at. They're not just doing it. I can put this. They're not just doing it for the big shows. They're doing it for the small shows. They're doing it for the house shows. They're doing it for small clubs in the back end of Osaka. They're doing it every day. This feels like it used to feel like. It's the closest thing we've had to that generation of wrestlers in the 1990s who blew everybody away. And we're getting to that point now where everything's that good.
Yeah, because it's not for the celebrity fanfare, social media, whatever other extraneous stuff that is kind of become such a pivotal part a lot of times in the art form. This is what you call absolutely for the love of the game.
Mhm.
This is the love of the game, and yeah, it's great stuff. And I'm a big fan of great scenery and love of sunset and all that bit. But there are a few things in all the world that are more beautiful than a perfectly executed bridging German suplex.
Oh yeah. It's a glorious, glorious thing. It really is. But even then, they're earning money. Stardom are selling out Sumo Hall. TJPW are selling out Sumo Hall. Sendai Girls are selling out Kurikan and Sendai Sun Plaza. They're all there. They're not quite just there. They're not quite bigger than the men's promotions. Yeah, Stardom will be bigger than New Japan within 2 years if they carry on the way they're going. The only thing they can't do is the Tokyo Dome. But I don't think any promotion can do the Tokyo Dome to do it justice. Even New
Yeah,
Japan, the Tanahashi's a farewell, you're going to get 50,000. That's the biggest crowd the Tokyo Dome has seen in 25 years. And absolutely justified. It's Tanahashi, of course it is. But equally, pro wrestling isn't the heights it once was. It's never going to fill the Tokyo Dome with 65,000 people, partly because the configuration's changed and they can't. It's not going to do what they used to do. The only play, but you're going to get 10,000 at an all women's wrestling show sooner or later. It's going to have to happen. They're going to go, well, yeah, it's already happened this year because they've gone to Stardom, have gone to Budokan and filled it and put 12,000 in there. So you're going to get to the point where you're going to get women's wrestling shows that are getting 12 and 10,000 again. They're going to go back to Yokohama Arena and do it there and Kawasaki and those places. And it's just
yeah.
amazing to see.
Yeah, because there's no, and obviously it's different cultures, but there's not necessarily such a need for like one-upsmanship when it comes to architecture like that. When it comes to the wrestling space, right? Like,
Mm.
there's no desperate. And I'm asking you this, like, there's no like thing of somebody like we have to build something that's bigger than the Tokyo Dome,
No,
that type of
there
deal.
is
Yeah,
no. It's more of like we need to do a bigger show than we did last year. They're
gotcha.
competing with themselves. They're not competing like the Joshi offices how splintered in kind of like 92. The splintering started to start then. But they always helped each other out and they always kind of like worked together to make Joshi better. And that's it's kind of it's more like traditional Japanese business. I always do this analogy. During the earthquake in the 90s, the Dunlop factory in Kawasaki closed down because the factory wasn't safe. Bridgestone made tires for them for 18 months until the factory was safe again because it didn't do Japanese industry good to have one dominant force. So Bridgestone helped Dunlop out, right? Which sounds daft to any other like country, but it's a collectivism, right? There's a collective idea. It's a collective idea of capitalism, and that's always kind of rung true in pro wrestling to an extent. Now, back when there was only two major promotions, Barber and Inoki, it could be which way the wind blows, whether they worked together or not, but they didn't hate each other. They worked together at certain points and didn't at other points. But generally speaking, you can tell in their wrestling style they went after two different products, right? So Barber was about telling stories through wrestling matches, and Inoki was about trying to make pro wrestling a real sport or trying to present it as a real sport. And the
Yeah,
same things happen with Joshi. There's a house style to every promotion we watch, right? Marigold's more about kind of a bit of there's always that mix of idol stuff of like, um, swimsuit calendars and selling t-shirts and that's Rossi Ogawa, right? That's the kind of background he's come from. He was an AJW person. You've got to have pop culture along with pro wrestling. And you look at Sendai Girls and it's pure pro wrestling, right? There's nothing else. There's no
yeah,
characters. There's no like development. Like Iwata is the same woman. The only difference between me watching Iwata now and 10 years ago is she kicks people harder and she wears red instead of white. And that's the only difference as far as I can tell, right? She looks meaner than she used to do. When she was 19, she looked, kind of mean. And now she's 29, she looks really mean. And that's kind of where we're at. And so, but that's what they do. And they've got a formula for each promotion, and each promotion does their thing. Like Tokyo Joshi Pro is probably a little bit outside of the other companies because of its association with DDT. But even then, like theirs is much more kind of like family fun, idol based wrestling, right? You have music and it's kind of taking that Crush Girls thing, the beauty pair thing to the extreme because they are actually idol pop stars who end up wrestling. So every company has kind of a trait and every company has an approach. Or you've got marvelous wrestlers on this show, and you've got Stardom wrestlers on this show, and you've got Marigold wrestlers on this show, and that's perfectly fine. Even though Stardom and Marigold are at loggerheads, they're two companies that will not work together because Rossi Ogawa took half the roster from Stardom. So that's it's though it's not always hunky dory, there is a genuine feeling of crossover between the companies. They all support each other in their endeavors. There's no one going, Stardom aren't going like, I have to thump Marigold out of business because that's counterproductive to, I have to make Stardom the best wrestling company on earth. So
yeah,
it's not like, you wouldn't get counter programming shows like you do with WWE and AEW, which is just dumb. It just puts you like in the spotlight of like being accused of stuff, so why bother? But you don't get that in Joshi because it's like, well, we might need to borrow that person next week for another show somewhere else, so we're not brass them off because why would we need to do that? Yeah.
yeah,
So while it's not, there's a collective responsibility to the business, and Stardom wouldn't have got where they've got without help from other people. But that doesn't mean, they're obviously all in competition. It's a business at the end of the day. But there's enough pieces of the pie for everybody to make money. So therefore, everybody helps everybody else. And that's fine. So it's if Stardom do Budokan, that's amazing and it's fantastic. And there's 5 to 10% help from other people. Equally, they all get out of each other's road when they need to. That's what the interesting thing about the men's wrestling scene is. They tend now to get out of each other's road. New Japan and Noah aren't in competition in the way they used to be anymore. And you see New Japan like loaning Hiromu Takahashi out to New Japan Pro Wrestling. To No Pro Wrestling. He's doing stuff for Noah now. That's fine. They're happy for him to go. They've done all sorts of things with the promotions. They do stuff with DDT all the time. The general feeling in Japanese wrestling promotions is it's pro wrestling. We're all pro wrestlers, and we're all about making money in pro wrestling, so we all help each other. There have been shifts down the years. Obviously, Noah and All Japan were at loggerheads for a long time. But even now, there's like guys who float back and forth. But it's fine. But yeah, I think the Japanese wrestling industry in general is in an interesting place because it's the first time the women's wrestlers are in a position to take over business-wise as well as quality-wise. And it's interesting the way the wrestlers talk about the business. Because Noah went on a mad rant because it was always goes on a mad rant. He's probably the future ace of Noah and his top heel in Noah. And his argument, him and Kiyomiya got voted the match of the year, and that match took place in January. And he said an interesting thing. He says that's a failure for pro wrestling because no one's coming in and played anything better than what we did in January. Shows you the attitude Japanese wrestlers have now. Yeah, that's which is not a defeatist attitude. Why aren't we doing better attitude? And that's a change. Now it's partly Ozawa the character, but there's a grain of truth in that. You've had a year. Why aren't you beating us? Why hasn't anyone done anything better than me and Kiyomiya did? We should, it's like someone should have done better. And it's a lot of things that Tsuji's saying as well about in his run up to the match at Wrestle Kingdom. He's like, I have to beat Takeshita because otherwise we'll become an AEW training zone like NXT or something.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, I think that's really interesting that they kind of want the Japanese industry to move forward. Whereas the women's division, the women's wrestlers are just doing it. They're just moving it forward. They're not making a fuss about it. But yeah, sorry, I went on a rant there, but you did ask me to, so I think that's fair.
No. Like I said, I could always, love hearing you wax poetic about this stuff because it informs the stuff around the show. Like you said, there was a time when a lot of these women, will end up being forced to retire because of the age situation.
So,
definitely. We wouldn't have gotten a lot of this. So the fact that, like you said, the quality is matching the business element of it, and they're gonna, got the potential to be as big as these long run promotions with just the men. It's great. On top of what we said about the MVP and the Workhorse Award. So everything is just culminating together.
Absolutely, I think that's the interesting thing for me is like the. There was a period in the last generation where it stopped being so serious because there was too much pressure. And certainly in the original iteration of Rossi's Stardom, there was far too much pressure and people got hurt. And then the change came when Io Sky, Shirai she was then, and Kairi Hojo and Mayu Iwatani took over the Stardom Dojo, and they made wrestling fun again, and they made people enjoy what they were doing again. And now we're getting back to it being serious again in all the promotions because there's more at stake and there's more pressure. But the pressure's come naturally. It's not been forced from the top. It's been pushed from the bottom.
Yeah.
So the wrestlers have brought the standard up not by being like whipped into it. They've brought the standard up just by getting better at what they do and going off and learning and watching other people. Well, why did Iwatani become such a big star in Stardom? How can I replicate that? Why is Io Sky in WWE? How do I get there? Why is Hikari Hojo such a compelling character? What makes her interested in her? What's Asuka done to change the industry? Asuka in Japan as an independent promoter is the blueprint for what Sareee is doing now. She did it first 10 years ago. And Sareee watched and she learned and she's doing the things that Asuka did. And, you know, all of those things shift the whole industry forward. It didn't hurt when Io Sky or Miyu Itani, it didn't hurt when Io Sky and Kairi Hojo left the WWE. It cleared out room at the top. It didn't hurt when Miyu Itani went to Marigold. It cleared out more room at the top. And it helped Marigold because the standard's going to go up because the best wrestler in Adam's history is in Marigold now, and she's dragging that roster up. There's always moves, there's always things that are helping those rosters get better. And then the standard goes up for everybody else because everybody goes and wrestles everybody else. I think we're in a really interesting place as far as Joshi is concerned for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued as well for like places like TJPW, which kind of are outside of the. It's not that they're not. They're kind of a different bubble, but they do really well as well. And it's not, and it's a different approach to pro wrestling compared to like Sendai Girls being dead serious. TJPW coming out of DDT as its host promotion and then forming as a Joshi company is obviously very, very different, right? It's kind of a bit more comedy and there's more storylines and there's more characters and there's big musical pieces, but it's also serious pro wrestling at the top. Really, really good pro wrestling at the top. And it intrigues me how they exist in a bubble outside of the Joshi world sometimes, but do just as well. In fact, do better sometimes than other companies do. I think it's really interesting to me how these companies intertwine and intermesh or don't and still succeed. Like, you know, there was the logic of, well, you got Meiko Satomura, she's the linchpin, she holds everything together, she's the final boss. What happens when she retires? Well, Sareee takes over that pole position easily, right, within about a month. And Ash takes over at Sendai Girls as the big star there. And all of a sudden, they're rocking and rolling. Every company's rocking and rolling. So yeah, it's really intriguing to me. And like, and instead, and the other thing is, of course, you haven't got like one ace in a major company. Like if you say like Yotsuji is the rising ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling, because that's really what he is. But you look at the Joshi world, you've got Sareee, you've got Hashimoto, you've got Iroha, you've got Kamitani in Stardom, you've got Miyu Mashita in TJPW. You've got 6 or 7 aces who are all exceptional, who are all putting in the work rate, who are all carrying their companies. Rising tide sinks all boats. Is my final thoughts, really. But it's a good tide to be on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any further thoughts on what you've seen today, Marcus?
I'm just glad I got a chance to see it. Like I said, Ring of Honor has yet to disappoint us with the shows that we've covered. They're only improving, and I don't think we can be disappointed by anything with Sendai Girls or Marigold. So, it's always just cool to get to these shows and really bring another perspective of a lot of shows that most people don't go looking for because they don't know to go looking for them, or they don't kind of want to broaden that perspective. But that's what we're here for.
Well, now was the time, and I'll tell you why. Because the yen just died against the pound. So if you're British, or even probably if you're American, price of the yen, I'm going to look it up because there was someone put a post of the yen. It's just cratered. So Wrestle Universe is 999 yen per month. That's £4.73 sterling. And US dollars is $6.34 a month. If you can't spend £5 a month or $6 a month on pro wrestling, you can watch Wrestle Universe, and for that you get Sendai Girls, you get Tokyo Joshi Pro, you get DDT, you get Noah, most of the Noah shows, Angana Bray, and Marvelous. 7 promotions there, and you will find something you will enjoy, I promise. Because
Yes.
there isn't nothing we don't like, is there?
And I
No.
second that. Like I said, it's a lot. It's a lot throughout the week. You know, the plate is as full as it's ever been in the history of the sport. But it's you know, the great stuff is not coming all from one place.